Thank you, Peter. The story I'd like to tell today comes from the Ukraine in the late 1700s, early 1800s, from a teacher by the name of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav. He was a story collector. In fact, the stories about his stories is that people would come to his dinner table and he would, in exchange perhaps, or just invite people to tell their own stories. And he would listen and collect them, and then the ones that he really loved, he would change in small or large ways, so in his words, he could hear the cry of the story, which I think meant that he wanted it to be relevant and speak to people about things that were needed, because he was a teacher and a healer. So this is a story called The Turkey Prince. And I'm telling it today partly because I love the story, and partly because it has a theme of liberation to it, which is the central theme for the holiday of Passover, which is coming up on the full moon. So the story goes that in an ancient kingdom, there was a royal family, a king and a queen, and their firstborn son, who was a very talented young man, but was also had a great weight upon his shoulders because he was in training to be the next king. And like a lot of talented, creative people put under great pressure, it was really starting to get to him. All these royal banquets and places where he had to be just so, and prim and proper, and know when to be quiet and know when to speak. And one day, at a particularly large banquet, in front of all the kings and queens, relatives and noble guests, something inside the prince just broke. And though he could not explain it to anyone, even himself, he got under the table and began making gobbling sounds like a turkey and flapping his arms as wings and eating the food off the floor, and he took his shirt off, and here he was, the Turkey Prince. Now, needless to say, his parents were aghast and ashamed and didn't quite know what to do, and though they put a great deal of pressure on their son, they loved him dearly and wanted to find a solution to what was going on, because try as they might, he wasn't coming out from under the table. And it seemed as though he was convinced that he really was a turkey. So they called in the doctor, and the doctor came, and it seems as though the prince wasn't too interested in taking medicine or taking advice about rest and refreshment. And it just wasn't working, and so they called in the magician. And the magician came and, waved the wand and cast some spells and used some herbs, but nothing seemed to work. And out of ideas, they said, I guess we should, if we need to, we should ask the wise man in town, who they had their suspicions about, but apparently this wise man had some skills. So this is several days after the banquet has ended at this point, and nothing's working, and they're getting worried, and they are feeding their Turkey Prince son, because he does need to eat, but he's again under the table, eating off the floor. And the wise man comes in, and the first thing he does is he takes his shirt off and he gets under the table and he starts flapping his wings, gobbling like a turkey, and eating off the floor. And the king and the queen are a little bit reluctant about this approach, but they decide, since nothing else is working, they're going to give it a shot. And the prince looks at the wise man, the first real acknowledgement he's given to anyone in days. And they just exist as turkeys for a while together underneath the table. And after a couple of hours, the wise man puts on his shirt, and the prince looks at him in bewilderment. And the wise man says to him, in human speak, turkeys can wear shirts. And so the prince puts on his shirt, and they continue gobbling and flapping their wings, and then a couple hours later, the wise man sits in his seat and starts eating at the table. And again, the prince looks at him sort of confused, and the wise man says, well, turkeys can eat at the table. And a couple hours later, they're using forks and knives and not flapping their wings, and finally the wise man says, turkeys can speak like humans. and the prince starts having a conversation, and he's cured. And so there's a lot of morals we could draw from this story, and the one that strikes me as most meaningful or relevant on a personal level is the idea that if we want to be of help, that it's really important that we're meeting people where they're at, and everyone's process towards growth and healing is going to follow its own trajectory, and sometimes it needs to go step by step and needs to happen at the right pace, because inside of each of us there can be a turkey prince. And the question is, how can we relate to that part of ourselves or to others who we know who have their turkey prince awakened within them to be the most help and to grow gradually in an integrated way towards healing, being our best selves, and being collaborating and happy together.